Welcome, friends. Welcome to today's Reconsider It live stream. Best live stream you're going to see all day. And here on this live stream, we are having a very nice discussion. We're going to be talking about themes related to cognitive hallucinations, mistaken perceptions, and what is human intelligence. We hear a lot about AI, artificial intelligence. But what is human intelligence? In the background, you hear one of my instrumental streams playing, replaying. This is my unspoken episode 7 from September 30th, 2025. The link is in the video description. Right now, we are just getting the stream together. You are feeling very comfortable at this time. Getting yourself comfortable. This is going to be such a good chat. While we are getting comfortable and getting the blood flowing a bit, I need to celebrate. I need to celebrate you. Whether you are here with us live in the chat, or you are here with us live, but you are not in the chat, or you are here with us after the live, you are watching on replay. However it is that you are here with us, I am going to celebrate you at this time in this way. I have got my drink. I am going to count to 3 and then clink. You are invited to join the rest of us as we cheers along and celebrate our togetherfulness. 1, 2, 3. Clink. Cheers, my friends. So today's topic, we're picking up on the previous streams, including our core themes, which I'm going to spend a little time repeating and reminding you. I see Alimandra is with us and has a question. My regulars know what these discussion streams are all about. We talk about themes related to communication, things related to how you can use some insights to your advantage. How you can have more effective influence. How you can adjust the stream camera. It's very effective. And where this comes from is my experience as an educator in various subjects, including this subject. This subject of like how to be influential, how to communicate effectively. Now, this is in the context of where you are formally recognized as the one speaking, For example, in a professional setting where I've been doing this for 20 years, if you were leading a meeting at work, let's say, or you're still at work in a professional setting, you're giving a presentation, or you're leading a class, or you could be a performer who's performing, to some audience. Anytime that, or leading a live stream, anytime that you are recognized as the one speaking, that's where the tools I bring you are the most effective. That's what they're intended for. When you're the one speaking and recognized as such, however that might be. And that, as I say, that's what I've been doing in a professional setting for 20 years. I've taught thousands of people. And I coach people as well on this stuff. All the things that I'm talking to you about today, and I have in the previous discussion streams, those themes, the main themes, not all the details. Some of the details are for you. But the techniques and such that I talk about, the insights about how to communicate, those things, I coach people on that. I've coached hundreds of people on that. So what you're getting in these streams, these discussion streams, is more than just a thought or opinion. These are effective techniques. As my regulars know from previous discussion streams, I have a couple of things, some loose themes of what I plan to discuss and share with you. But this is not at all meant to be just like a monologue. This is not meant to be one of those settings necessarily where I'm just recognized as the speaker. This is meant to be more of a discussion. You likely will resonate with a lot of the things I say. Some of them you will have your own insights because you already do this stuff in some way. And you say, oh yeah, I do that in blah, 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 blah. So you might have that kind of stuff that you want to share if you're here with us live in the chat, or if you are watching after the stream, you leave it in the comments when you have thoughts and insights about these things. And you'll pick up some things too. That's the best part of it. But more of a back and forth is your invitation. Or you can just listen and watch. That's good too. A lot of people prefer that. In any case, I will keep us loosely, roughly on some kind of vague direction, but your contributions enhance, your sincere contributions enhance the content. In any case, I see Studio 8FX is in the place. Yes, my man. We've also got Pretzel King. Hello. Maddie with it. So I'll begin, as I have in the previous discussion streams, by doing a light recap of previous topics, including our core foundation that I usually refer back to and is a helpful tool for building upon. And that is, of course, from a communication standpoint, like what is communication, etc. But what is it, etc., in a way that you might get a new skill or tool out of it, or a new insight. That's the kind of stuff. So my regulars know that we use the core metaphor, the foundation metaphor is a driver, like a computer driver that the piece of hardware needs. If you have experience with computer hardware and such, then you already know what I'm talking about when I say a driver. But if that doesn't necessarily mean something to you, or if you just want to know what I mean about drivers, here's the brief recap. If you want more information, you can find it back in streams 1 and 2 is where I cover it in the most depth. But the idea of drivers is that a piece of hardware needs a way to communicate with another piece of hardware. And this is not a metaphor. This is just like literal physical computer engineering. a piece of hardware like a motherboard and another piece of hardware like a mouse or a keyboard, they need to have some way to communicate. A motherboard being the place where everything is processed and handled, the central processing unit, if you will, that is part of the motherboard. So anyway, the idea is you have your CPU on the motherboard, and it needs to communicate with the mouse and the keyboard. And so if you think about just physically what is happening on the computer, like let's think of the mouse for a second. You just think of it physically, what's happening. The mouse has some buttons, and when you press a button, it has to send an electrical signal through the wires of the mouse, and that electrical signal has to get received by the motherboard, and the CPU handles it. And when you click that left button, it sends whatever ones and zeros. 110011, whatever it is. Cool. Now the computer, the CPU, receives that 11001, and it has to have some way of knowing that that means you did a left click. It has to have some means of translating the 11011 or whatever it was. Because the 11011 doesn't necessarily mean anything. The electrical signal that the mouse sent doesn't necessarily mean anything. What matters, the actual meaning, the significance, comes from the ability to interpret it. And that has to be sent from the mouse and received from the CPU according to some shared deciphering mechanism. And that's the driver. Now you have the keyboard as well, and you press a letter on the keyboard. You want to type your name, let's say, and you press whatever letter your name begins with, or it's a number. How about this? I'm going to pick the number 7. You press the number 7 on the keyboard, and that has to also send a signal to the CPU. So the keyboard, you press the number 7, and it says 1101117, well, whatever. And by coincidence, by sheer coincidence, it's the exact same 11011 that the mouse sends when it sends a left click. And that just happened to be what the 7 is when you press it on the keyboard. So now the CPU receives the same 11011, or whatever it is, and it has to know somehow that, wait, the way to decode this is not left click, but rather the way to decode this is as the key 7. And so there has to be some other driver, the keyboard's driver. And now the CPU has to have both drivers so that it can communicate with both pieces of hardware. And that's just how computer engineering works. There are these things called drivers that are shared between the sending piece, maybe not, between two pieces of hardware, without limiting it to sending or receiving. Between two pieces of hardware, they need to communicate. And that varies per piece of hardware. So if it's keyboard, it's the keyboard driver. If it's the mouse, it's the mouse driver, and etc. Cool. So we have the idea of a driver. A driver is a device-specific piece of software that enables it to communicate with other pieces of hardware. And again, that's not a metaphor yet. That's just actually how computer engineering works. You have drivers. Hooray. Now came the metaphor. The metaphor was, of course, that I am drawing a parallel and asserting that something analogous is true for humans. That's where that's building up to. So I do assert that there is such a, on some level that, I don't know, may or may not be cataloged in any catalog, but on some level there is an element to communication between two people that is determined by their drivers. And way back in the first discussion stream, I said that the like if you experience miscommunications, there's a way to understand it through this driver metaphor. If you experience miscommunications, like you're talking to a friend or what have you, and um, I don't know, they misinterpret something you say, or you misinterpret something they say, and you get upset about that, and then they're like, "What are you getting upset about?" And then you have this miscommunication. That I assert can be explained through this thought experiment or this metaphor of drivers. The idea that you have a driver so that when you say something to someone or when you hear someone else say something, you have your drivers that you interpret through. Oh, you sent me a 11011. Okay, well, I interpret that as you said blah, blah, blah words. Okay, I interpret that as, yeah, you interpret it as you have drivers. And so does the other person. Hence my assertion that when you have miscommunications of some sort, it's due to some kind of, you know, I guess, non negligible mismatch between your mutual driver set, whatever that might look like, in some yet unquantified manner. Just a very high level metaphor. So, in some sense, that brings us close to what the point of today's stream is, which is the idea of cognitive hallucinations, ultimately building up to what human intelligence is, the nature of it. Cognitive hallucinations are, of course, when you do have a miscommunication of some sort. You do misinterpret something. Or someone else does, one misinterprets something. You can have two people watching the same movie but have different reactions. You can have two people listening to the same music having different reactions to it. Sometimes those different reactions can be, pretty close, not too different. And maybe that's a friend of yours, someone you get along with well, because your mutual miscommunications are subtle or slight, or they're inconsequential, or whatever it is. So that would be someone with whom your driver set is, I don't know, let's say overlapping, significantly overlapping. Or how about, if not necessarily significantly, how about this? Within the scope of your interactions, your driver set is reliable enough, your mutual driver set is reliable enough that you don't have conflicts. You don't have like relationship destroying conflicts. So that's miscommunications. But cognitive hallucinations are, in some sense, maybe like a one-sided miscommunication. The kinds of cognitive hallucinations I'm talking about here are the ones where you might say it's like a. Are you familiar with the idea of a bias? What do you think of biases? Biases are also things that I used to have some role, not a very large role in this department, but I used to have some role in developing content. I mentioned that I'm an educator, been an educator for just short of 20 years. in this particular professional setting, but an educator for altogether for, oh nice, yeah, 25. As of the recording of this streaming, I believe it's just at 25, just a week over, maybe a week under 25 years as an educator, as my formal profession. That's good. That's good. I should be celebrating. I'm going to celebrate with some water. This is an optional cheers. This is not a formal cheers, but if you would like to join all the rest of us who are cheersing along, we can celebrate our togetherfulness. It's really good. Here it comes, my friends. Cheers. Nice. So I have brought up a list here of various cognitive biases. I'm going to kind of scroll through these. But the idea basically being that you don't realize that you're having a misperception. That's the core theme that I'm trying to strike at. You have a cognitive hallucination, but it looks right to you. Like if you ever been in a math class where you were doing, I don't know, whatever, x plus 7, whatever you're doing, and you're doing pretty well, and you feel pretty good with it, and then you have this problem that you can't understand, you can't figure out. You thought you had it, but it was wrong. You thought you had it. That moment of you thought you had it, that's the cognitive hallucination that I'm referring to. Before you were proven before you were proven to be hallucinating in your understanding, before you were shocked into that, wait, hold on, I thought before that you had no idea. You thought you understood it. So that's the kind of moment that I'm summoning there. And here's a few. I just pulled up a list. Let's look at a few of these. First one says anchor bias. That's when if you get presented with a number of, if you're in a decision making context, that's where this is applying. If it's in a decision making context and you're presented with a variety of choices, but you're presented with them one at a time, then you have a leaning or bias toward what you're first shown. You have to read some data or whatever. You're most persuaded by what your first exposure is to the thing. Anchor bias. It's not, all of these biases are not like, I mean, maybe I shouldn't say that about all of them, but many of these, or at least some of these biases are not like, you know, disrupts your life level. These are often subtle things, which is why I say that you don't know that you're mistaken about the thing. You're not getting feedback that you were mistaken. But the anchor bias, that you have this, I think I'm going to go with, or you're always like comparing. The first thing you get is the first bit of information you get on whatever, the first option you get, that like occupies a space uniquely in your attention, in your mind, occupies this space. And then everything else is like that comes into that space is it's somehow in comparison to that. Anchor bias. The next one here is bandwagon effect. I mean, this has been my personality my whole life. The opposite of this. Bandwagon effect. That's where you just kind of go along with what's happening around you. You look to see what others are doing in order to, act the way is expected, kind of thing, or do what is expected, if not act what is as expected. Yeah, this one, I don't have any kind of necessarily explanation, But I always used to go against this most of my life, and still really, that if there is a, I don't know, widely adopted thing, opinion, something's popular, it's not popular, whatever it is, I am often on the opposite side of what is just widely accepted by everybody else. I am almost intentionally. I wouldn't say this is intentional, but this is like sub intentional. I sub intentionally go against this bandwagon effect ever since I was, oh my God, I don't know, my teens, maybe younger than that. I'm not sure. But yeah, maybe that was adolescence that I'm recalling. The bandwagon effect, the tendency to adopt something because that's what is the norm around you. Bandwagon effect. Oh, how about this one? Yeah. The sunk cost fallacy. You ever heard of that? This bias? The sunk cost fallacy. That's where if you make they talk about this in financial investments. If you make some investment, a couple $100, let's say it's $500. You make an investment and let's say it just really drops. And you can see as time goes on, it was $500 and it dropped to 108. It really just tanked. And then it just mostly stayed there. It wasn't very good. It kind of got worse. And you're like, okay, well, I'll see if it picks up. And you leave it for months or even years because you say, well, I put in the 500. Meanwhile, you really should just take whatever the 108 it is you got, just cut your losses. But you're likely to not cut your losses. They talk about that in that investing kind of setting, or businesses. If a business is failing, the owner might stick it out for a long time, even though it's like, all right, it's cut your losses and go. It's like, I don't know, I want to go a little, it might pick up. So it's like you don't let yourself, this is the hallucination part, you don't let yourself, as an ego preserving mechanism, you don't allow yourself to acknowledge that you may have made a bad decision. So as an ego preserving thing, that's like, well, it's not that I invested in the wrong thing. It's just maybe it was the wrong time and it'll pick back up or something. But your ego doesn't let you acknowledge that. And so it's like, well, hold it out. It's not that you made a bad decision, but it was a good decision. It's a good investment. Stick it out. It's a good investment. They got some more biases. What else I got down here? So again, that was the anchor bias, the tendency, if you are in a position to make a decision of some sort, and not even formal decision, just like walking about your day, there's a gravity to the first choice that you are presented with of various choices. There's a gravity toward the first one. Then we talked about the bandwagon effect, where you just kind of go along with what's happening around you. And it doesn't necessarily, I don't mean to present that as a deficiency. Earlier when I said I was always defiant of that, I meant to present myself as perhaps I could dial back the defiance against this bandwagon effect. The sunk cost fallacy was the other one, where there's a tendency to just stick it out even if it was not a good investment. But they got some more. What else they got over here? Oh, this one, yeah. So you've heard of confirmation bias. You've heard of that one. Confirmation bias, of course, being where you just kind of see what you want to see, you hear what you want to hear. You're like, yep. You are interpreting what you experience in the present moment as just like what you expected. Yep. Okay, this is more or less what I thought. As you look around the world, you have really no idea. Neither do I. We all, each of us individually, we have no idea what is going on around us at any time. What anyone around us is thinking. We have no idea. We act like we do. We act like, oh, that person's probably just walking their dog. We have no idea what's going on in that person's head. And somehow, I don't know, maybe it's just me. Maybe I have a bias that you don't. But that's not something that I spend a lot of time thinking about as I'm walking around. But it's true. I do spend a lot of time being mindful of my surroundings, mindful and careful, and in a state of readiness. But I don't get lost in the idea of how like each person's mind is completely off limits to me. I have zero idea what's in that person's head. I see Studio 8FX has brought a chat to the chat. Studio 8FX says, I had to learn to educate myself before commenting on certain subjects. Oh, for real. That is such a, I don't know if that's a bias. Would that fit into one of the biases we talked about so far? No, not yet. Maybe you could maybe call that a confirmation bias of a sort, where you think you know where you are. Studio 8FX says, like, what I'm talking about is like the internet made me learn that way back in the day before the internet. I had to learn how to not open my mouth sometimes. Yeah. Yeah, there is you could maybe say that's a confirmation bias of a sort, but that's like a tendency that, by the way, I mean to say that I share that. So I'm with you on that. But that's like a tendency to assume uh that, oh man, it's a lot of assumptions. To assume that your level of awareness is um, up to the conversation. Is that Dunning-Kruger? Let me double check what Dunning-Kruger is. Yep, that's what that is. That's Dunning-Kruger. If you're not familiar with Dunning-Kruger, it's what I basically just said. There's this tendency, which, by the way, I openly acknowledge that I also have. That's why it's a bias. It's just how human brains work. It just like there's a blind spot when you drive in your car, or like if you just think about the fact that you are currently sitting there, perceiving whatever you're perceiving. You're pointed in a direction. You're pointed in a direction of some sort. That means there's stuff that you're not perceiving. There are blind spots, like right now, that you perceive directly through your sense organs. So it's something analogous for your mind, that just the way that your and mine, everyone's, that our psychologies, our individual psychologies, that your psychology is built, like just the way it's constructed, it has blind spots. That's all these biases are. Sometimes, as I said earlier, I I have spent a little bit of time, not a lot, a little bit of time working with education materials, creating education materials for these types of biases. And one of the things I've found in that setting, if you discuss biases, and by the way, let me pre-acknowledge that I also have this effect. I think everybody, I think this happens with most people. It's rare to find someone who this doesn't happen with at all. The following: that when you discuss biases, people tend to get defensive. They tend to get defensive, and they tend to get like, here's examples of how that doesn't apply to me. Here's examples of how I try to not have that bias, which is good. You know, the most you could do is like try to be as aware as you can, but they're just part of your mind. There's there's no way to not have them. Having awareness doesn't make you not have these. You're still every bit as susceptible. But I see we also got Emperor Kamikaze in the place. Yeah. And Emperor Kamikaze agrees with Studio 8FX and me, and others too that are with us and agree, but have not put that in the chat. But Emperor Kamikaze says there's the unspoken rule: know something about the topic before speaking. All not beyond, in addition to the topic. And Studio 8FX says, I wish everyone would do this. Yes, yes, that would be a good rule to apply. But even just the topic, there's also like levels of awareness of the topic. Ah, man, I wish I had an example to cite, but you know, it's possible to go into a conversation, you overhear people are talking about, I don't know. Let's say it's two people talking about what do you like? Do you like basketball? I don't know much about basketball. But you hear some people talking about, I don't know, last night's Lakers game. And you go over there and you have your opinion. You're like, I don't know, da, 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 da. And you didn't realize that you're talking to what, the owners of the teams or something. Just because you know something about the topic still doesn't really mean that that's a conversation for you to participate in. So there's some kind of context or something like this that is also relevant beyond just the topic, which is another good subject. The context, by the way, that's included in the whole driver metaphor, because the context says things like, here's the device you're talking to. This is a keyboard. This is a mouse. But it also says, well, this is the specific type of keyboard. You know, these are the owners of the team. All that. So context is big in all of this. So back to the biases, the cognitive hallucinations. And by the way, you know the title of the video here was including human intelligence. This is what I was alluding to. We have this idea that at how your mind is built, it's built with blind spots. And that's not a failing. Like, let me say that out loud. I mean to say that it's not a failing of some sort. It's not something that needs to be fixed. The fact that you have blind spots. If you feel like you want to have more awareness, that's a good feeling. It's good to try to develop more awareness. But it's also okay that you have blind spots like these things. All right, let's look at some more of these biases here. Some more of these cognitive hallucinations, as I called them. The next one in this list here says the halo effect. And that's the effect of like, there's something you like about the person, and then you just think that they can do no wrong effectively. And we have this one of the educational materials that I helped build was for a again, a professional setting, doing something like leading a class or leading a meeting of some sort. If there is somebody who, let's say you have an existing relationship with them, let's say you're having a meeting, you're leading a meeting, you have some project with, I don't know, 6 people or whatever, and there is, let's say, 2 people who are eligible to have this cool project to work on. there's like this offshoot thing you need to assign to someone, and there's two people who are like well qualified to do it. Let's say one of them you have an existing relationship with them, and so a positive, let's say you have a positive relationship with them, but the other one you, I don't know, don't really know them much yet. There is a tendency, however however much it's a subconscious and however much you want to try to overcompensate for it, there's a tendency for you to want to side with the person who you have a favorable opinion of. And it doesn't necessarily have to be someone you know already. Let's say somebody is wearing a cool shirt that you're like, oh man, that is actually a really cool shirt. Like you're surprised. You're like, man, that is just such a cool shirt. Normally, I'm not much of a shirt person. I don't even notice a shirt that a person's wearing most of the time. But that is a cool shirt. And some other person who's just like, oh yeah, that's also good. There is a tendency, however subconscious it is, the person has attracted a positivity to them. The person wearing the cool shirt, they have attracted a positivity to them that gives them this, as it's called, the so-called halo. So that's what this is talking about. The tendency for you to have an overall preference for, or like, or how about this, or a forgiving perspective toward. Let's say both of them do some kind of, I don't know, obnoxious thing. One of them, one of them says like a an inappropriate joke, and the other person says an equally inappropriate joke. They're all on the same level, mildly inappropriate. The person with the cool shirt, who you kind of like for some reason, you're more likely to be like, okay, to their mildly inappropriate joke. You're like, all right. But the person who you didn't necessarily have any favorable opinion toward, however subconsciously, you're more likely to be like, well, come on, you know, you're more likely to get a little confrontational rather than a little more forgiving with the person who has the shirt you like. The halo effect. This is subconscious stuff. It's good to try to be aware if there is a way to compensate in a healthy way, in a mild, subtle way, cool. In the same way that you would, let's say, you'd swivel your head and turn around in order to compensate for the fact that you don't have eyes in the back of your head, for example. You would move your head and body. That's a way that you're compensating. That's the idea with these biases. If you have some sense that you have these biases, these aren't like, these biases are not, they are not, they're not like academic topics to just be like, uh-huh, yes, I agree, that's true, and then just never do anything with them. That's not the point of these discussions. What else have we got here? Oh, this is a great one. Yeah, the in-group bias, it's called, where if you do have, someone who, or let's say a group of people who are your little circle of friends socially, or if I stick with this professional setting, or they're, your team, you were leading that meeting of 6 people, and you guys have built a nice relationship over the course of whatever months that you're working together. Now, after that project's over, you will have some kind of affinity toward the people who you worked on that project with, who you presumably had a good relationship with them. And so that's your group. You have this affinity toward that group. All of these biases are not like, your hands are shackled and your behavior is controlled. You will never show favor. These are just like little gentle tugs that you don't notice. That's why it's good to have some way of just like, let me double check. I don't know if was that really, that's a, that's what you do with all, that's how you turn your head to see what's behind you, kind of thing. What else have they got here? Oh, nice. I wouldn't, I didn't know if I knew it by this name. It sounds familiar. So maybe I did hear this name before, but I like the idea of this one. This is called the availability heuristic. The availability heuristic. Placing value, or let's say, I'll interpret this a little bit. Um, Placing credence in, or believing, or allowing yourself to be persuaded by what just is there immediately available to you. And they use the idea of what comes to mind. But it could literally also be, there was, some piece of paper sitting next to you, and you're like, oh, you know what? I think I will. I don't know. Let's say it had an ad for pizza on it, and you're like, okay, I think I will go get some pizza. Availability heuristic, or it's just what you yourself, um, when you are presented with the topic or the decision, or someone asks you a question, there is something that comes to your mind first when you hear it. It may or may not be immediate, but something comes to your mind as the first thing that comes to your mind. And so there's this tendency to just be like, well, that must be the answer. It's the first thing that came to me. I mean, that's where my thoughts went. So certainly that's the right answer. The availability heuristic. Oh my goodness. So what would you do? What would you double? You would doubt yourself? Is that how you'd be like, well, I don't know. This is what I thought. I was one time leading a discussion on not, what was it? I would, at this point in the discussion, it was about what it means to think logically. When I went to school, brief tangent. When I went to school, when I went to my bachelor's, which is that's what I mean when I say went to school, my bachelor's program, I majored in math, just pure mathematics. And in those years, I wrote a lot of logical proofs. I had developed at that time a rather strong grasp of like what logic is and all of that. And how to be very strict with it. How to be very strict, like really, really, really. There's no room to not be strict in math. So I had to be very strict with logic. So uh, that was where my experience with logic, let's say, originated. Formal logic originated. And I was discussing, as I say, I was giving a presentation, I was leading a discussion on how different people think. If you're leading a class, I was giving a presentation on leading a class. I often do meta things like that as part of my 20 years of experience with working with hundreds of people on all of these topics. So I was talking about thinking logically versus an alternative, and that's why I bring this up now, just to draw this contrast. All of the past couple of minutes, we're building up to right here, just so I can say this contrast between what it means to think logically, or just to use logic, let's say, as opposed to this sort of availability heuristic that we're talking about here. I'm pulling it all together. Here it is. So I was discussing logic, like, all right, you might have this logical way of deducing, logical way of thinking, which is a linear type of thing. It's step by step. In each step, you don't necessarily know future steps. You may or may not in some cases. And then there's things like, if then, you got to have the idea of truth in when you use logic. That's a core element. The idea of truth. Is this true or is this not true? That's relevant if you're using logic. So I was having that little brief uh, illusion there. And then I contrasted it with just thinking by association. where you just say, oh, I'm experiencing this thing through my sense organs. I'm hearing things, I'm seeing things, I'm feeling things, and that makes me think of, or that makes me remember, and then you start thinking that thing, and then you're like, well, that makes me think of, or that makes me remember, and there's this like very illogical leaping that's more like free association, sort of like a one-step free association, more like that than it is like logic. And I was just drawing that contrast. And so now I'm drawing that contrast right here. Hooray! And I'll add a little more here. Wonderful. That's so great. But this idea of just like free association thinking, that's really the way most people operate most of the time. It is common to think, many people believe that they are operating logically as they go about their day, but usually not. Usually not. Most people are not like that, including me and probably including you, question mark. I don't know you, so I don't know for sure. But if you're like the overwhelming majority of people, people are not logical. People do whatever, they're associated with at any given time. What their mind associates at any given time. It is possible to use logic to think carefully and evaluate options and evaluate, deductions. It is possible to do that, but usually people do that in a limited context. You're going to sit down in order to figure out what to eat on the menu. That's more like logic because you're thinking like, if I have this, then this, blah blah blah, and would I enjoy that? You're evaluating things. That's closer to logic, but outside of a limited context where you're making some kind of decision or you're evaluating something, aside from that, people aren't logical. And I don't mean to say, by the way, I do not mean to say they're irrational. They could be perfectly rational. That is to say, have reasons. I don't mean to say they're irrational. I don't mean to say that they're, if they're not logical, what are they? Are they emotional? I'm not necessarily saying that. They could be, that's possible. But, let's say not emotional, let's say not necessarily any claim to rationality. When I say that people do not think in a logical way, they're not, maybe I should say rational, but I'll say logical. They're not logical. When I say that, what I mean is they're doing this free association type of thing. They're just like, oh, that reminds me of this. And then that reminds me of this. Oh, that makes me think of that. They're not doing like a deduction. Even as you listen right now, probably that's not what's happening. You're probably thinking of whatever you're thinking of for whatever reasons you're thinking of. I don't know what it is, but it probably has to do, it would probably be explainable through the whole driver framework because you have your way of interpreting things that mean things to you and what it means to you and all of this. And so this, free association availability heuristic, whatever comes to mind easily, effortlessly, without thinking about it, that's most of the time what most people are doing. Myself included, probably also you. I see there's some chat in the chat that I should get caught up on. Emperor Kamikaze says, emotions fly in the face of logic for most people. They can. They can. I would agree. That would be a second layer, in addition to the fact that your brain just is more like a free association. Because thinking logically is more like a muscle. It's like flexing a muscle. You could do it. It's doable, but only for short periods. You could go running for 45 minutes. You could work on, some puzzle for 45 minutes. Sure. But not 24/7 for 10 years. It's limited. It's in a limited scope that you can be logical and evaluative. And outside of that, you're more like a free association machine. And another layer, as Emperor Kamikaze says, another layer is the emotional layer, which is very real. And when you have emotions, they feel real because that your emotions are as real as things get for you. And I just exhaled a bit there. Your emotions are as real as things get for you. That doesn't mean to say that you should place a lot of, um, would you say, faith wouldn't be the right word for that, but you shouldn't place a lot of, I don't know, weight in your emotions. You should feel them. You should feel them fully. I mean, most people would agree with that. You should freely, effortlessly, and fully feel what you feel. But you shouldn't be overwhelmed by it. I think that's the theme there. And again, people would most reasonable people who can be reasoned with, people who can use logic in brief bursts, but then outside of those bursts are really just free association machines. Most reasonable people would agree with that. To not be overwhelmed by your emotions. Emperor Kamikaze also says, "We do some dumb stuff most days." Yes, yep, that's me. I do that. I like to hope that, I don't know if I could even be so bold as to say that I hope that I at least do one good thing every day. That's pretty bold. That's a pretty high bar. I hope at least once every day I do at least one good thing. But even if I can't aim quite that high, I would like to hope that even though I do a bunch of dumb stuff most days, I like to hope that I'm like doing less dumb stuff. The amount of dumb stuff is decreasing. That's my like minimum aspiration. And I hope I'm can I say confident? I don't know if I can be confident in that, but I hope that's true. Whew, man. We have had a really good cognitive hallucination discussion today. I like this bias discussion. After I started the stream and I pulled up this list, I started thinking like, oh, I should have gone back and pulled up examples because when we developed all those materials, we had, every time it was once a month that we put together a presentation for one of these biases. I don't know if we did all of these that I shared with you today. We certainly did more than this list. We did probably like, I don't know, 15, 20 or something. Is that program still happening? I'm not sure if that's still happening. But anyway, we did like 15 or 20 of these, and each one of them had examples. So that's why I say I should have probably grabbed those before I just pulled up this short list with basically just names and one or two short sentences that describes them. Availability heuristic. I don't know if that's exactly the free association that I'm talking about, the free association mechanism, but I'm all right with it. By the way, that free association mechanism would operate according to the laws of quantum physics. I'm surprised that more people don't make that connection between quantum physics and psychology. That's like a free association. It's probability based. It's unpredictable. How you associate, how you think moment to moment in that free association sort of way. That's quantum physics. I'm surprised that people. I don't know. Maybe people do make that connection, and I just haven't caught wind of it. In any case, friends, it has been about an hour. We have had a good discussion stream. This one was pretty nice. It was very informal. We went off in very different directions. I pulled up a list and just read it. This is a very different format today. Let me know what you think about that. Would you like me to have more of my usual topics? I'm still experimenting with these discussion streams, seeing what's gonna flow best, what's gonna provide the most value. Let me know what you think about that, my friends. We will have more of these discussion streams. I'm still keeping one a week. Dot 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 question mark. That's my target frequency. Once a week. That's what I'm. So you can look forward to another one of these sometime soon? Question mark. Also, For my regulars who are part of the Reconsiderate family from the music domain, you will continue to get a lot of the music streams, a lot of the looper stuff, the improvisational live looping. That's all vocals. You're going to get that still, just like you always do most days, plus a little bit of synth in there, some hanging out and discussion, also some streams that are instrumental. You're going to still keep getting all that. Friends, thank you for being here today for this discussion on cognitive biases. Once again, the whole point of this is that this is not this is not a fault. This is not something that I'm presenting as some kind of judgment of a fault. That's not what this is. This is describing how the fundamental structure of your mind, your psychology, sets you up to have these hallucinations, these biases, these subconscious things that you're not aware are happening, but are making you lean in a certain direction or lean away from, some other direction, or are making you just play favorites in some way or play anti-favorites in whatever way, or to not think logically, to just be biased toward what came first, or biased toward what you already thought, or biased toward whatever happened to occur to you. These are fundamental um, mechanisms. Can you say building blocks? I think building blocks is the wrong word. I'll say mechanisms. These are fundamental mechanisms of your psychology and other people's psychology and my psychology. So these are not bad things, but it does behoove you greatly to have some awareness that, just like you can see, uh, if you have that faculty, and I acknowledge that I must direct this exclusively toward, with your eyesight that you have, if you have it. With your eyesight, you see in front of you, but you don't see behind you. And so you need to turn your head because you acknowledge that you have blind spots. You also have blind spots psychologically. And until you know that, then you don't know you have blind spots. And that's you want to get beyond that level of awareness. And that's what you're here for. And that's why you're here, and you're still here, and you're sticking around, and you're down with this kind of stuff. And so you're the kind of person who's able to turn your head and just remember that you have these blind spots, these leanings, these things that are happening because you're not paying attention to that particular dimension. You can't pay attention to all dimensions at all times. That's not possible. You can only do one at a time. And so, by virtue of needing to take your metaphorical eyes off of some aspect of something, biases kick in. And so that's why you turn your head. Friends, I'm looking forward to. Oh, Ty Grail is with us. Yes, that's good. Ty Grail says, in my family, we have this irrationality. I think that's pretty normal. That's more normal than most people are capable of acknowledging. And what I'm capable of not of acknowledging is that this was just such a fantastic stream. We got, what was it, like 6 or 7 biases? I didn't even count them up. What do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7. Oh, you know what? They don't have it. Oh, Dunning Kruger, it's in this list too. We talked about that one briefly. You know what I didn't see in this list was what do they call it? The bystander effect. You know that one? The bystander effect. I would call that a bias, but I would be open to an argument that it doesn't quite fit the definition of a bias. The bystander effect, where nobody takes action when something needs to be done, something like clearly, plainly needs to be done, but nobody takes action because everyone just assumes someone else is doing it. That is, whoo, the bystander effect. Whew. Hopefully not of high consequence when it happens, but man. Anyway, thank you for being here today, my friends. This is such a good stream because you have been part of it. Ty Grail says he was doing a collaboration. That's dope. Really? That's nice. Collaborations are nice. Yeah, for my music people, I definitely um, I like collaboration. I was thinking the other day how I like building up the areas that I'm good at, but there's so many things that I'm I'm not great at. Like I don't. I feel like my bass lines could use a lot of work, so I'd be interested in and just beats in general. I like working with a producer. I like when I could get a good, I like that beat and I'm gonna rap on it. I enjoy that a lot. That works well for me, and I could just let all the rhymes fly. Um, or more logistically, business wise, I find it easier if a bandmate or a producer is handling all of the like booking live shows, or formally putting together the album and getting it onto Spotify and all that. Ugh. Let me just write the rhymes and I'll jump on stage and captivate everybody. I'll do that part. Yeah. Oh man, this is good. Friends, I hope to see you again in the next live stream. Whether it's another discussion stream at some point in the next week or so, the next discussion stream, or if I see you again and it's a music stream, whenever it is. Until then, my friends, please have a very good rest of your day today. Please have a very blessed and healingful rest of today. Please have all manner of blessing and healingfulness today. And I will see you in the next Reconsider It live stream.